In the year 1287, the largest contiguous land empire in human history set its sights on a small kingdom of rice farmers. The Mongol war machine had already swept from the Sea of Japan to the borders of Central Europe, leaving legendary capitals like Baghdad and Kiev in ashes. They had just crushed the wealthy Song dynasty of China, and absolutely nothing seemed capable of stopping them. Yet, as their massive armies marched south into the humid river valleys of Southeast Asia, they were walking directly into a trap. Within months, their powerful fleet would be shattered, their elite commanders would flee in disguise, and their dream of global dominance would drown in the mud of northern Vietnam. How did this happen? To understand this impossible victory, we have to look at the terrifying war machine the Vietnamese were up against. To the medieval world, the Mongol army was not just an army, it was an existential force. They did not conquer simply by overwhelming their enemies with numbers. They won through unmatched mobility, psychological terror, and a weapon that redefined warfare, the composite bow. Crafted from layers of horn, wood, and sinew, this bow could pierce armor from hundreds of yards away. On the open plains, Mongol horse archers could ride for days, changing mounts without stopping, striking like lightning before their opponents even knew they were under attack. But this terrifying war machine had a highly specific set of environmental requirements. To maintain their vast herds of horses, they needed endless open grasslands. To keep their composite bows from falling apart, they needed dry air. When the animal hide glue in a composite bow gets wet, the layers can delaminate, rendering the weapon useless. Now, picture the kingdom of Viet in the 13th century. Ruled by the highly organized Tran dynasty, which held power from 1225 to 1400, this was a land of dense jungles, monsoon downpours, malaria, and endless, waterlogged rice paddies. It was an environment completely hostile to cavalry warfare. There were no wide plains for sweeping flank maneuvers. There was no grass for hundreds of thousands of war horses. The Tran dynasty had spent decades building a remarkably centralized state, forging a deep cultural connection between the royal court and the common peasantry. They understood their terrain intimately. They knew that the Mongol horses could not eat rice, and they knew that an empire built on speed would choke in the mud. When these two incompatible worlds first collided in 1258, the Mongols expected a quick surrender. Instead, they received a masterclass in scorched earth survival. In the winter of 1258, a seasoned Mongol general named Uriang Khedai led a veteran force down from the Yunnan Plateau. His objective was simple: secure a southern route to outflank the Song dynasty of China. As the Mongol cavalry rode along the Red River, the Tran court faced a terrible choice: stand and fight an unmatched military force, or watch their kingdom burn. They chose a third option, one that would become their strategic signature. The Tran emperor, after a brief and bloody initial clash, ordered a full retreat. He did not just pull back his troops, he evacuated the entire population of the capital city, Thang Long. Imagine being a citizen of Thang Long, told to pack only what you could carry, burn your remaining rice, and flee into the countryside. This was not a panicked flight. It was a highly coordinated evacuation. When the Mongols entered Thang Long, expecting to capture a grand capital filled with treasure and grain, they walked into a ghost town. There were no people to terrorize, no food to plunder, and no local officials to force into submission. This is what historians call empty city warfare. Within weeks, the Mongol soldiers and their horses were starving in the empty streets. The tropical heat and unfamiliar diseases began to sap their strength. When the invaders were at their weakest, the Tran forces struck back in a swift, coordinated counteroffensive, forcing Uriang Khedai to retreat back north. The first trial was over, but it was merely a prelude. Over the next 2 decades, the Mongol threat grew exponentially. Kublai Khan conquered the Song dynasty, established the Yuan dynasty in China, and became the master of East Asia. He demanded total submission from the Tran dynasty. When the Tran refused to act as a launchpad for further conquests in Southeast Asia, Kublai Khan decided to crush them once and for all. In late 1284, A massive invasion force under the command of Kublai Khan's son, Prince Togan, assembled on the northern border. Historical records from the era are highly contested. Vietnamese court chronicles write of 500,000 invaders, while modern historians analyze the logistics of the era and suggest the actual combat force was closer to 150,000 to 200,000 men. Regardless of the exact number, it was an army of unprecedented scale for the region. To face this existential crisis, the Tran royal court did something extraordinary for a medieval monarchy. They did not just consult generals, they consulted the people. In late 1284, the Tran emperor convened the Dien Hong Conference, inviting elderly representatives from villages across the kingdom to the royal court. The emperor laid out the terrifying scale of the invasion and asked a fundamental question: should we surrender to save our lives, or should we fight? The response from the elders was a unified, thunderous roar: fight! This was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a masterclass in political mobilization. By giving the common people a voice in the decision, the court forged a profound sense of national unity. To prepare the military for the coming storm, the supreme commander, General Tran Hung Dao, wrote a stirring call to arms, known as the Hich Tuong Si, or the proclamation to the officers. He did not sugarcoat the danger. He spoke of the humiliation of seeing foreign envoys walk the streets of the capital like conquerors. He challenged his officers to look beyond their immediate comforts and recognize that if the kingdom fell, their ancestors' graves would be defiled, their families enslaved, and their names forgotten. The message resonated deeply. Soldiers across the kingdom voluntarily tattooed the words Satdat, meaning "kill the Mongols," directly onto their skin. This was a lifelong commitment. There was no turning back. When Prince Togan's army crossed the border in early 1285, they faced a nation completely united in its resistance. Yet, the sheer weight of the Mongol advance was devastating. Togan's forces pushed deep into Vietnamese territory, capturing key defensive positions. Once again, the Tran court made the painful, agonizing decision to abandon Thang Long. They watched their capital fall to the enemy for a second time. This strategy required immense psychological courage. To burn your own fields and abandon your ancestral homes is to walk a razor-thin line between strategic retreat and total collapse. How long could a population endure such sacrifice? As the summer of 1285 approached, the gamble paid off. The humid tropical heat soared, and diseases like malaria began to ravage the Mongol camps. Togan's supply lines were stretched hundreds of miles through hostile territory, constantly harassed by local Vietnamese militia forces. The invaders were exhausted, sick, and starving. Recognizing the turning point, General Tran Hung Dao launched a series of brilliant counterattacks along the Red River Valley. The Vietnamese forces, highly mobile in their light wooden boats, struck the sluggish Mongol columns with devastating precision. Prince Togan's army disintegrated. The prince himself was forced to flee back to China, reportedly hiding inside a bronze tube to protect himself from Vietnamese poison arrows. The second invasion had failed spectacularly. But the Tran knew that the master of Eurasia would not accept defeat lightly. Humiliated by two successive retreats, an enraged Kublai Khan spared no expense for the third invasion in late 1287. He knew the Vietnamese strategy by heart now. They would run, they would hide, and they would starve his troops out. To break this cycle, the Great Khan did something different. He assembled a massive land army, but alongside it, he commissioned a giant supply fleet of 70 ships carrying tens of thousands of tons of grain, commanded by a general named Giang Wen-hu. If the Vietnamese burned their crops again, it would not matter. The Mongol army would have an endless supply of food. By early 1288, Prince Togan's land forces had once again occupied a deserted Thang Long. Just as before, the streets were empty and the fields were bare. But Togan was not worried. He was waiting for Giang Wen-hu's massive grain fleet to arrive at the coast. What Togan did not know was that the supply fleet was already gone. In the coastal waters of Van Don, a brilliant but controversial Vietnamese commander named Tran Con Du lay in wait. He realized that the heavy, slow-moving supply ships were the true center of gravity for the entire Mongol campaign. As Giang Wen-hu's fleet sailed near the shore, Tran Con Du launched a fierce, coordinated naval ambush. The light, highly maneuverable Vietnamese vessels swarmed the lumbering transport ships. The battle was swift and total. The bulk of the Mongol food supplies were either captured, sunk, or burned. When news of the disaster at Van Don reached Thang Long, the psychological blow was fatal. Togan realized his massive army was sitting in a ruined capital with no food, surrounded by a hostile population, and facing another deadly tropical summer. Starvation and disease were already creeping into the ranks. Desperate and defeated, before he could even fight a major battle, Togan ordered a full retreat back to China. He split his forces, taking the land route himself while sending his naval division, commanded by General Omar, back by sea. This was the moment General Tran Hung Dao had been waiting for. He knew the exact route the retreating Mongol fleet had to take to reach the Gulf of Tonkin, the Bac Dang River. This was not just any river. It was a waterway with a legendary history. More than 3 centuries earlier, in the year 938, a Vietnamese commander named Ngo Nguyen had defeated a Chinese invasion fleet on the Bac Dang using a brilliant tactical trick. Tran Hung Dao decided to play the same hand, but on an even grander scale. The key to the strategy was the tide. The Bac Dang River experienced dramatic, twice-daily tidal shifts. At high tide, the water rose high enough to conceal large ships. At low tide, the water level plummeted, exposing the treacherous riverbed. Under the cover of darkness, Tran Hung Dao mobilized thousands of local soldiers and civilians. They felled massive trees, sharpened the ends, and drove them deep into the muddy bed of the river channel. For centuries, legends claimed these stakes were all capped with heavy iron tips. However, modern archaeological excavations in Quang Ninh province have revealed a more complex, pragmatic reality. Archaeologists have uncovered the actual wooden stakes preserved in the mud, showing a mix of materials. Some were indeed capped with iron, while many others were simply thick, sharpened hardwood timbers, driven into the riverbed at precise angles to catch oncoming hulls. The trap was set. Now, the Vietnamese had to time it perfectly. This was a literal ticking clock. If they lured the Mongol fleet in too early, the high tide would allow the warships to sail right over the stakes unharmed. If they acted too late, the low tide would expose the stakes, and the Mongol commanders would see the trap and turn back. On a spring morning in April 1288, the Mongol fleet sailed down the Bac Dang. A small flotilla of light Vietnamese boats appeared, staging a mock attack before turning to flee in apparent panic. General Omar, eager to secure his escape, ordered his massive warships to give chase. The Mongols charged deep into the river channel. Then, the tide began to turn. The water level plunged rapidly. Suddenly, the lead Mongol ships shuddered and ground to a violent halt. The sharp, heavy wooden stakes pierced through their hulls. Within minutes, the mighty Mongol fleet was completely trapped, impaled on the hidden forest of spikes, unable to turn or maneuver. From the dense foliage along the riverbanks, the Vietnamese unleashed their counterattack. They rained fire arrows down upon the wooden decks. Small, nimble Vietnamese attack boats darted between the giant, crippled warships, boarding them and throwing the Mongol crews into chaos. It was not a battle. It was a systematic destruction of an empire's naval ambition. General Omar was captured, and his fleet was utterly annihilated. With their fleet destroyed and their army shattered, the remnants of the Mongol force fled back across the border, ending Kublai Khan's dreams of southern expansion forever. The water of the Bac Dang River eventually washed the blood from its banks, leaving behind a quiet landscape of mud and broken timber. The physical victory was absolute, but for the leaders of Viet, the true danger was only just beginning. They had pulled off the impossible, but they now faced a terrifying diplomatic reality. How do you survive winning a war against the largest empire on Earth? The Tran dynasty knew that a humiliated superpower is often more dangerous than a confident one. Kublai Khan was still the master of East Asia, with millions of subjects and nearly limitless resources at his command. If the Vietnamese court celebrated too loudly, or if they treated the defeated Mongol Empire with contempt, the Great Khan would simply send another army, and then another, until Viet was erased from the map. So, the Tran turned to a highly sophisticated, deeply pragmatic strategy of asymmetric diplomacy. They decided to conquer the peace with humility. In the winter of 1288, just months after the slaughter at Bac Dang, Tran envoys made the long journey north to the Yuan capital of Dadu, modern-day Beijing. They did not arrive with the swagger of victors. Instead, they brought traditional tribute, offered formal apologies for the border clashes, and returned captured Mongol officers. By doing this, they gave Kublai Khan a crucial political gift: the ability to save face. To his own court, the great Khan could claim that the southern rebels had been brought to heel and had returned to their proper place as vassals. This was a precarious diplomatic tightrope walk. The Tran dynasty voluntarily accepted the nominal status of a tributary state, sending regular missions to China. Yet, inside their own borders, they maintained absolute sovereign independence. They did not allow Mongol officials to govern their land, they did not pay ruinous taxes, and they did not surrender their military control. They gave the empire its pride, but they kept their freedom. Even with these diplomatic maneuvers, the peace was incredibly fragile. Kublai Khan's personal pride was deeply wounded by the defeats. In the early 1290s, he began planning a fourth, massive invasion of Viet, ordering shipyards in southern China to construct hundreds of new vessels and mobilizing fresh troops along the border. The threat of total war loomed once again. But in early 1294, before the invasion forces could cross the frontier, the 78-year-old emperor died. His successor, Temur Khan, inherited a strained treasury and chose to permanently cancel the campaign, finally bringing an end to the Mongol dreams of southern expansion. Globally, the consequences of these campaigns were profound. Along with the failed Mongol invasions of Japan and Java, the repeated disasters in the jungles and rivers of Viet shattered the global myth of Mongol invincibility. For nearly a century, the world believed that the Mongol horse archers were an unstoppable force of nature. Vietnam proved that this terrifying war machine had clear geographic and strategic limits. By successfully holding the line, the Tran dynasty helped stabilize the geopolitical borders of Southeast Asia, ensuring that the region preserved its distinct cultural and political identity. But how did a small kingdom pull off what the greatest empires of Europe and Asia could not? The answer lies in a strategy that is still studied in military academies today. When military historians look back at these three wars, they often ask a fundamental question. Was it just the rain? Was it just the malaria, the mud, and the heat that defeated the Mongols? While the tropical environment played a massive role, geography alone cannot explain this victory. Other nations with difficult terrain fell to the Mongol advance. The true secret of Viet was something far more sophisticated. It was a total mobilization of society, a concept that modern military theorists call a people's war. The Tran dynasty did not fight these wars with just a professional standing army. Instead, their military doctrine relied on a dual system. They maintained an elite royal army, the Quan Triu Din, for major engagements. But they also organized vast networks of local village militias, the Quan Lo. Every peasant became a part-time soldier, and every village became a self-sustaining fortress. When the Mongols advanced, they did not just face a traditional army in uniform. They faced a population that poisoned wells, hid food, and launched endless nighttime raids from the shadows of the jungle. This total unity required immense trust. How does a medieval monarchy convince its poorest citizens to burn their own homes and risk their lives for the crown? The answer lies in how the Tran dynasty governed. They recognized that the ultimate weapon against an empire is not advanced technology, but social cohesion. In the year 1300, as the legendary general Tran Hung Dao lay on his deathbed, King Tran An Tong came to him to ask how the kingdom should defend itself if a northern empire ever invaded again. The dying general did not recommend building higher walls or buying more weapons. Instead, he left the king with a piece of advice that would define Vietnamese strategic thinking for the next 700 years. He told the king that when the enemy invades, the court must act as one, and the generals must treat the soldiers like their own children. Most importantly, he advised the king to ease the burdens on the common people, to reduce their taxes, and to care for their livelihoods. He called this sparing the people's strength to deep-root the roots of the tree, declaring it the absolute best strategy for defending the country. This ancient doctrine of national unity and strategic resilience was not just a historical footnote. It became a living blueprint, one that would echo across the centuries when Vietnam faced global superpowers in the modern era. The story of the Tran dynasty and the Mongols is more than just a chapter of medieval history. It is a timeless blueprint. It shows how strategy, deep social trust, and an intimate understanding of one's homeland can level the playing field against the most formidable forces on Earth. When we look at the modern world, the lessons of this ancient conflict still echo. Asymmetric warfare remains one of the most difficult challenges for any military force, no matter how massive or technologically advanced. If you were leading a small nation facing a global superpower today, which of Tran Hung Dao's strategies would you rely on most? Would you choose the painful sacrifice of empty city warfare, or would you focus on deep-rooting the strength of your people to build an unbreakable social bond? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to discover more incredible, untold stories from Vietnamese history that shaped our world, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and share this video with a friend. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next chapter.